All right. Welcome to WeatherGod's Wisdom, where we talk about tropics, and once we get into severe weather season, we'll start talking about that stuff. But for now, we're focusing mainly on the tropical Atlantic. We've got 3 storms out here right now. We've got this Gulf trough thing that's connected to this upper level low that's about to move into Texas. Still moving pretty west at a good clip. And then you've got Tropical Storm Humberto, and now this system that's kind of just a gyre on this monsoon trough here. And if you look at the 250 millibar vorticity map of the Atlantic, you can see the upper level low that has been affecting Humberto and this Gulf system has retrograded very far to the west. And this benefits Humberto more than it does the Gulf system because it's still in close proximity to the Gulf system. If you look at where the National Hurricane Center has it, it's right here, and you can see that the system is still having a lot of shear being impinged upon it, which is why convection is really only firing off outflow or being able to fire off outflow on the northern side because it's ventilating that northern side. It's not really ventilating anything else. This is all being cut off at about 25 north, which is bad for the system. As this moves to the west, the upper level low will eventually degrade, and you can see this on the GFS model. 200 millibar winds. You see upper level low right in here. It moves very slowly to the west, and the shear kind of degrades as the system is now centered over the upper level low, and it gives it a little bit of time to strengthen a little bit. And so we could see a quick spin up here. I don't see this organizing that much. It's very broad. If you look at the infrared loop, you can see this is kind of just a convective mass over the Gulf of Mexico, and it's not really doing much. But we have another storm to talk about that's a little more important. Tropical Storm Humberto, which today has been focusing on getting its low-level circulation, which is somewhere right about in here where my mouse is, under this convective blob of sorts. And it's really begun to feel the relaxing shear as this upper level low moves to the west and gets away from the system. Again, if we look at the 200 millibar vorticity here, there's not a whole lot that's going to be shearing the system. There's a little bit of shear from the south right here, but other than that, that's why it has been able to build this upper level anticyclone around it. And you can see on the water vapor loop of the system that this holds true. The feathery clouds coming out of all quadrants on the eastern side. Once it hits the west, it's a little more difficult for it to fire off, and completely absent on the southwestern side, and it will be working through that. And as expected, as the storm gained latitude, it was able to organize faster. And if we look at the 5-day forecast, you can see that it will quickly strengthen once it gets around 30 north and continues on to the northeast and really exits the area. There's not much land that's in the way of this, so this shouldn't be too much of a threat to the United States. This, however, does have implications on other storms. If you look at the 500 millibar height anomaly here, as Humberto gets really strong, in this GFS model, you can see that it enhances this trough. And so, actually, I'm going to get a little bit better of a coloring here. It enhances this trough, and so the ridge that is supposed to be dominating the Atlantic is not as strong, and you can see that it is eroded greatly by Humberto. But as it works around, the pressure gradient increases, and so the ridge is able to strengthen. Now, it ultimately depends on how strong Humberto gets to get this pressure gradient really supercharged in order for this to have significant implications on our next system, which we're going to look at right now, our 60% chance of developing in 5 days. This has recently been dropped by the GFS model. In the 18Z run, you can see that it would be around here, and it's not there. But if you look at the previous, 5 runs, it has a well-defined hurricane in various areas. So this is kind of a confusing drop that the GFS has, and you can see it's much further to the east at this point. And this actually would be bad if it was further east, because that would allow the 500 millibar ridge to develop much faster, or give it more time, I guess, to develop. And you can see here that this pretty much, the 591 millibar isobar right in here, just directs it almost directly to the United States. This would not be a good solution if a tropical system of any caliber were to follow this track. And you can see that something here breaks it apart. Again, that's like 168 hours away. But you can see that if Humberto is able to strengthen as it is expected to into a hurricane, and maybe even a major hurricane, some models that have it as a major hurricane actually, like the European model, have it as a major hurricane out here. And you can see this lower level ridge, which dictates a weaker storm, like what the Euro shows here, actually is pushed further north because of how strong Humberto gets. It erodes the storm or the ridge, but then ultimately supercharges it once it gets to the north. And ultimately it all depends on track, because GFS has consistently shown Humberto to go almost due east-northeast for a while, and the Euro has taken it into Newfoundland, or very close to Newfoundland, before turning due east-northeast. Takes it a little further north, so it doesn't have as much of an effect on the 500 millibar ridge as the GFS has it, because it is not as close. However, there's some weird entity it develops that allows the same solution that the GFS has to play out, but it's not 100% feasible. I think that this scenario is just very weird to me. It's had this happen a few runs. You see, this is the same run from yesterday that had a similar entity. It's a little closer here, and you can see that the ridge is able to work its way a little further west. But if it's further east, then it's stronger, but it's further. The ridge is stronger, but it's further east. So this is a confusing predicament. How strong does this system get? Because we've gone from this is going to be a hurricane to this is going to be nothing in 6 hours. And so it faced the NHC and various weather enthusiasts like myself are faced with an interesting predicament. This is just, right now it's very broad. Actually, if you look at the 850 millibar vorticity, it's towards the edge here, and you can see this is not very tight. However, given the amount of moisture that this is surrounded by, there's not a whole lot that's going to be limiting this system, so it doesn't make sense that this just suddenly gets dropped by the GFS model and the Euro model, because the Euro also has a relatively weak system. If you go back to the lower dynamics, it has this very weak system that ultimately gets affected more by the lower level ridge than the upper level ridge, which would move it further west. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and this is, again, still a very long way out, and there's not really been a whole lot of consistency on how these systems kind of flesh out. And so we end up with a very just whack. This is not a situation that you can really pinpoint, and there's still a lot of lead time before any of this stuff happens, because Humberto still has to strengthen. And clearly, if you look back at Humberto, it is not doing that. it is going to do that, but it is going to need to strengthen before we can determine how much it strengthens and how much this ridge is affected. Because right now the ridge is relatively strong. You can see it reaches out all the way almost to the Carolinas. But as the system continues to intensify, we'll see how much it erodes it initially and then recharges it. It depends on how strong it is and what happens with our system in the eastern Atlantic right here. And this is a very confusing situation. I wish I could deliver more answers to you. But we've had a sudden shift in the model forecasts because last night, if you look at the European model, last night it had our system, had it as a hurricane at some point. And I mean, you have these systems like kind of just getting close to the United States. And so it's very different. And this is kind of a symptom of long-range forecast modeling. It's going to have a lot of variation, a lot of different forecasts are going to come out, and they're all going to be very different because you can't really predict things that happen about a week in advance. This is not meteorology. Meteorology is not there yet. Wish we were there, but we aren't. And models are not gospel. You kind of have to look at things as they happen as well as look at the models that forecast those things. But right now, the Atlantic has two ridges, one ridge right here, one ridge right here, and a trough splitting them, and a trough coming in right here that is going to carry Humberto out to sea. But how strong Humberto gets in the next couple of days, we will need to watch, and believe me, you will be posted about this. And how strong the ridge ultimately re-strengthens to, all is a part of this unnecessarily complex system that we have going on right now. So stay tuned and stay safe. All credit goes to Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com, and be sure to refer to the National Hurricane Center and National Weather Service offices for any official information regarding Tropical Storm Humberto, the Gulf system, or our East Atlantic system, although that will not be discussed for a while. The National Hurricane Center as intensely as a storm closer to the United States will be. So with that, have a good night, and thanks for watching.